Alright guys, so let's break down my latest release, Aircraft, out on Artificial Music. And this is one version of the project, which was before I bounced everything out to stems. And then I did a lot more processing, and then I did a couple of stem projects, and then I did a mastering project, which took me forever as well. So the sound in this one is not obviously the final sound, but it's the final composition, you know? And then I'll take a quick look at the stem project after this as well. But we can run through the composition here first. And yeah, it's a short and sweet track. I haven't released a track this short before, I don't think. It just kind of came together quite quickly from the first, from the beginning up until the drop is only 16 bars. And I didn't feel like I wanted to create another 16 bars for this one. It just kind of felt like it should drop really quickly. And then I just did two 16-bar kind of parts for the chorus, then a breakdown, and then another two 16 bars with slight variation, and then like an outro. And the concept for the track was basically to have this feeling that you're in an airplane with this sort of aircraft ambience, like this sound here. I thought of the track as I was sort of sleeping, listening to aircraft ambience on Spotify on my headphones. I would often sleep with this sound because I find it's kind of like white noise, you know. I found it quite easy to get to sleep to that kind of noise. So yeah, I thought of the concept maybe while I was asleep or as I woke up, and I was like, this could start a track. Wake up to the aircraft ambience and then go into the drum and bass, you know. So anyway, so it's like the aircraft ambience starts the song, and then you have all the drum and bass, and then it finishes with the aircraft ambience again, like sort of fading out, you know. So that's kind of I wanted to have it as like a song that I could listen to during takeoff, like when I'm flying, because it's like yeah, it's only 2 or 3 minutes long, so it's about the sort of same time where like the plane's taking off. It's sort of the same amount of fun for like just those 2 or 3 minutes when you're leaving the runway and taking off. You know, it's probably only fun for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it's like, okay, we're in the air now. But yeah, so it's kind of good length for takeoff. So I like to listen to it when I take off. And yeah, basically it comes around, it sort of centers around this sample, this vocal sample, which is from like a vintage movie, like an old royalty-free movie sample. And it sounds, it says low-flying aircraft.
Low-flying aircraft.
And then I use the vocal a lot to make different textures in the song.
Come on.
There's a few other little samples from the movie as well.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's not like a famous movie, and it's a royalty free sample, you know.
The runway's far too short.
He says the runway's far too short, and then
which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
This is exactly what he's been waiting for. I really like the vibe of that vocal, you know.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
And so, as you can hear, I did a lot of effects. I have different layers.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
So to make it darker and weirder, I made some layers that are pitched down. So they basically, I use the pitch shift from kilohertz because it sort of degrades the sound a bit, and I kind of want to mess the sound up a bit.
Which is exactly.
So it's pitched down.
Which is exactly what he's been.
Then it's run through convolution white blur, 50 milliseconds.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
Then it's run through some tape.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
That gives it, yeah, just a
which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
Lo-fi, low quality feeling. And then it's run through Ruiner.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
And that uses the Doom mode here.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
Which adds like low-end rumbling distortion character. So After that, then I EQ some low end out
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
and just control the treble a bit there. And then it kind of sits behind the main one.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
It fills up a lot of high end as well, as you hear.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
So it acts as a stereo layer, a dark character layer, and a high end layer.
The runway's far too short.
And so that sits on top, or sorry, sort of behind a lot of the vocal parts. But then you've also got another one here, which is minus. You can see I've written it here, -5, -12. It's basically the same, but it's just pitched down even more. And that's for this first part here for the drop.
Low flying aircraft.
And then you've got
Low flying aircraft.
you've got then other samples that are sort of placed in sections of the drop to give like almost a little push of energy, you know?
Go. Come on.
Go.
So it says like go and then come on, or something. It sounds like it says go, let's go, come on, you know?
Aircraft.
Go.
Come on.
Go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Go.
Come on. The runway's far too short.
Go.
So the vocal is almost acting like a lead throughout the whole track. And yeah, it has this kind of melody to it almost, or like a call and response to it, you know?
See what he's been waiting for.
Go.
There's even parts where I leave the tail in for this sort of extra weird texture. Over here then,
Come on.
Go.
The runway's far too short.
it's pretty much the same samples again, kind of reused for the second part, just in a slightly different variation. Yeah, that's basically the vocals. And they've been sort of EQ'd a little bit where I've thought they were a bit,
Go.
Which is exactly
maybe taking up too much space in the mix in certain areas. They'll go into a group, and there's just a compressor on the group to control the volume levels of everything. So it just kind of makes everything, a bit more balanced, you know?
Low flying aircraft.
Go.
Ah, yes. You also now hear the other little parts that are important. So I sort of I have this background part to the vocal that's in the whole time as well, and you hear it originally before the drop here. So it's where she says low flying aircraft. I just looped it. I just looped the low. I already processed it probably with reverb and things like that. A bit of reverb and delay. Here I just used the multipass after I bounced it out to exaggerate the high end more, saturate the high end a bit. And then, but that's the intro, and it's got like a lot of low end in there still. But then when you get to the one on the drop, it's basically the same thing, but it's got all the low end taken out, and then it's been sidechained to the kick as well. So I use the LFO tool to sidechain it, so it's just a volume automation, essentially. But lots of low end taken out, so it doesn't interfere with the basses. And then again, it's got a bit of a high end saturation on. And that thing in the background, it's just quite important to add like the vibe in the background, yeah. So this vocal just fills up the background and gives a bit of tension in the high end as well. If you listen to it in the mix. It adds depth, and it means the vocal texture is always present. So before, without that, you've just got the one shot kind of things,
Go.
Come on.
But having that layer there in the background, adding the depth.
Go.
Come on.
It ties all of the vocals together, so they don't feel like they're out of place because they're all sitting on top of a background texture, which is already the same vocal sample, so it's the same sort of frequencies. So that helps to get a lot of cohesion, You've got some other samples here that are also kind of from that from that vocal movie sample, but it's I've kind of used them in creative ways. It's like some of them are sort of ambience from the vocal sample, and some of them are actually, you know, little bits of vocal still. But it's, for example, this one here, this just a sort of delayed out where she says aircraft, like the last part, the craft, has just been sort of run through beam or something and delayed out to create like a little texture like this. And then this one here, that's also from the word craft, but it's been resampled and run through again, another creative plugin to almost create a little like drone kind of thing. I use it in the intro because I really liked it, and it sounds like a bit of a, you know, like a sonar signal beacon, I don't know, that kind of thing, you know. It sounds like a kind of underwater thing, but it's sort of quite spacey and dreamy, and it kind of works well with the ambience, you know. This thing here is like a little squelchy texture. Again, it's made out of the vocal, just running it through Portal or Beam or something like that. So basically take little chunks of the vocal and just make loads of FX sounds using it, you know. So that's why I like to work with vocals, because they're a great source material for creating FX. So all of the effects are just made from the vocal one shots, you know. Anyway, this sort of hazy thing, this underwater thing, it kind of goes with my aircraft ambience, you know. Yeah, I feel like it has this sort of dreamy quality to it. Okay, so yeah, basically then, yeah, you see I've got these other little things, and they basically have this kind of this part here is quite prominent in the track. If you listen, this sort of middle sound here, it's like I can't really describe what it is, but it's still weird, like dreamy tension kind of thing, you know, atmospheric sound. But yeah, you kind of hear it in the background in the mix if you pay attention. I'll turn it up a bit so you hear it a bit better. So it sort of acts as a little response, you know, in these little gaps. And yeah, it's like sort of atmospheric pressure in the background, you know. But that's all that kind of coming from the vocal stuff. So that's this whole lot of sounds kind of talked about and dealt with. You've got some other things that happen on the second 16 here. You've got like yeah, another version of the vocal. It's been pitched down and then it's just looped on a like once a bar kind of thing. You know, just change up the background kind of composition as I go into the new 16, and then yeah, this part also has like this aircraft ambience back in the mix down again over the drop, you know, but it's been like sort of high passed. Okay, so I'll just have that in there as well. And then this is like this is like a new sound that comes in later. It's pretty much just in the breakdown. I can't remember where it comes from now. I don't remember if it's a synth that I played in or if I just resampled something and it turned out like that. I imagine I probably played it in on like a synth and then I just ran it through, as you can see here. If we take off all the plugins, maybe we can... Yeah, I think it's just... It's probably just something I played in on Serum and then just processed it here. like to create a little lead sound. You know, the Space Blender probably doing the heavy lifting here, and the dual delay, bit more EQing, and then brightening up with the multi-band saturation. So that just acts as like it acts as like a little interesting lead kind of melody thing for like the breakdown, you know. So it's not really a lead that you have on the during the actual drum and bass parts, you know. But yeah, so that's like an extra sound. So these sounds down here, I like haven't grouped them up, and that's basically because I sort of got to a point where I was nearly finished and I was getting a bit lazy, and then I, you know, eventually bounced out like sort of stem versions anyway, and I would have grouped it up when I bounced out like the FX stem or something like that. We'll find out in a moment. But yeah, that's basically sort of the vocals and a lot of the effects down here. And then, yeah, we'll move on now. And I've got like a bunch of other sort of effects sounds to talk about. And then the basses and the drums and the sort of bass layers as well. So what you've got up here as well that sort of ties in with the vocals are these blip sounds. So this one that sort of repeats in the build up here, and then you've got these louder, more pronounced, almost like lead blips that are up just before the drop here. And you kind of hear them in the context here.
Flying aircraft.
And then you've got a little one here as well.
It's far too short.
And they come in again later as like a main lead element here.
What he's been waiting for.
Okay, so lots of blippy delay textures. And they're really out of time. They're on purposely out of time, you know, in the beat. So they kind of just like yeah, they kind of break the monotony of like the straight sounds in the track just by adding some off the grid kind of chaos. And yeah, essentially they're also again made from they're an effects sound that's made from the vocal sample. And it's basically, they've basically been run through, again, probably a beam to give some sort of granular output. And yeah, they've just, you know, I've already bounced them out as that sort of effect. And then I've done stuff to process them. For example, I've put on a supermassive to give them more reverb. I've taken out some low end where I've needed to with an EQ. Boosted the highs a bit, added extra delay, and then I've saturated the highs at the end as well. I did that after the clipper, which doesn't really make much sense. I probably should put the clipper last really there, but you know, it doesn't really matter too much. It was already you know, it wasn't actually going into the red, so it's not such a problem. But yeah, those are the blips. Again, this one down here, similar kind of or slightly different processing, but I'm basically just fitting it into the mix down, you know, adding extra tape and reverb and delay, compressing this one a bit here as well. It all just kind of just to mix it into the rest of the track, you know. But those are the kind of blips, right? And then we can take a look now at the drums, shall we? Should we take a look at the drums? So what you've got for your main drum beat. It's a nice one, isn't it? You've got this distortion layer, which has been created as well. And I'm not sure, I think it might already be processed with the distortion on. Probably has been. We can just have a little check here. Ah, yes, you can hear what I've done here. So it's got a sub bass in. I could probably do a separate video about this technique, but basically, to create my distortion layer for the drums, I've run the main drum break with everything on it, together with a sine wave into some distortion. So I would probably have used like the kilohertz distortion, I would guess. So I've run the drum break like this, the main beat along with a sine wave, and then put that all into a group, distorted the whole thing, so you'd got this distorted drum and sine wave together, and then bounced that out to get this. So this sort of distorted drum sound with like a sub bass in it, because the sub bass kind of like changes the sort of character of the drums. And then to make it into a layer, then I've sort of taken out all the loads of low end. I just want the high end, convoluted it with a bit of reverb. The small control room, it's also a nice one on the convolver. More low cutting, just sort of doing it quite smoothly. And then transient shaping, softening the whole thing. So it's just becoming this high end kind of texture almost, More low end and then compression as well. It just ends up like that. Just this kind of nice high end distortion texture that sits on top of the drums, But the rest of the drums, if we take a listen to them, I put that distortion layer back into the group again as well here. The the drums just have a bit of saturation in the high end, 1K and upwards with a bit of overdrive. And that's all the processing on this group here. Just a clipper after that. So everything's nice and clean and powerful just from the original samples, really, So we've got, we've got. I think I already, I would have already bounced out the break that I created. I was probably trying to save space or something here, but I already made a kick and snare. Made a sort of, already had a sort of kick and snare loop going, it would seem. And then I've layered up that with a bunch of other drums, so we've got these snares where I've taken the main snare here and I've used a space blender and I've created two new versions of the snare and panned them both out left and right. So we've got this kind of left and right stereo layers to the snare. And as you see, the kind of space blender here, what it does, it changes the whole texture, convolutes it, makes it darker, gives it this whole kind of new vibe to it, So snare layers, self-created with the space blender. Then we've got a bunch of other stuff as well. We've got some rides here. Really soft, splashy kind of layer. Just sort of maximum reverb, It's really soft rides, reverbed right out. And then they've got all this movement on because they're sort of they're sidechaining. They're actually sidechaining to something which is very odd here, the Audio 5. I'm not actually sure what that is. I thought it was sidechaining from the kick, but it seems like they're sidechaining to something called Roomy, which I thought I saw that. Yeah, here it is. What is this then? That's very bizarre. They're sidechaining to a bass layer. So not sure why I've sidechained it to that. But anyway, they've got this big kind of compression sidechain movement on, right? And it's basically sidechaining against the bass rhythm, I don't know why I've sidechained it to one of the bass layers and not the actual bass itself, Maybe it sort of moved around during the routing at some point, but yeah, they sidechain against the bass essentially. And I've got these nice these nice deep kind of percussive hits with like some sort of noise in the sample. So it's quite a textural kind of addition here. Okay. We've got some other sounds that come in later on, and these are the sort of pickup breaks here. So this second section where it gets a bit more busy, have this sort of classic drum and bass break, and I layered it up with a convolution layer with some tape. So I've got the same break again, running through a couple of convolution reverbs and some tape, taking out some low end, just shaving off a little bit of the transient and taking out a bit more low end, and then that basically creates this new convoluted kind of stereo layer to the break that sits sort of behind it. So fattens it up and makes it makes the whole break sound a lot more like yummy and stereo, you know. So that's like an extra element that comes in at this part. And we've got some other elements here. That we've got like an open hi-hat that I've pitch drifted around a lot, you know. So every hi-hat's kind of different. It's got the pitch drift from Baby Audio on it. So it's kind of pitching all over the place. I like to do that with a lot of cymbal stuff. Bit of low end taken out, bit of delay, and a bit of shaping again with the transient shaper, you know. So I'm adding in these extra layers in the second 16 because I want more energy there, you know. So the first 16 is a bit more minimal, and the second 16 you've got that break and the extra rides, and then we've got a couple of other like kind of drum elements that are just for like the intro as well. So we've got like this sort of bounced out version of the break that's sort of been distorted and reverbed out a lot with the supermassive. So all the low end's been taken out as well, you know. And then we've got another version of the sort of pickup break that came in later, but this time it's been space blended out, so it's really convoluted again. And this one's been low pass filtered, and it kind of opens up over time. Again, more reverb on there. And so you sort of got one like high passed version of the main break, and then you've got this sort of percussive extra break that comes in later, which has been low passed. So two different kind of breaks, one high and one low, both like reverbed out, and they just give you the kind of vibe for the build up, you know. Yeah, but you kind of hear also how the percussion kind of one shots here add a lot of vibe to the drums as well, you know. You know, I've sort of made these guys and then bounced out the kind of group. You know, I've done a little bit of arranging to create this sample, and I've bounced it out as one. Because what you're seeing is the final composition project, but already at this stage of the composition, I'd sort of grouped a lot of things together, bounced a lot of things together, like the sort of the main kick and snare groove. I'd already, you know, bounced it into one file, you know, and same for a lot of other things. So you're seeing like already a lot of the audio that's already been resampled, you know, but to walk you through the whole process would take hours and hours, you know. So this is the most newest composition, or you know, the latest composition project. So then you've got but the percussions, they have like a melody on them almost, you know. So they really add a lot of vibe to the drums. Without them, it's just quite atonal. You know, they add a lot of tonality to the whole beat. So that's not too bad, is it? Quite important, really, those kind of percussions. They actually drop out later. You know, when you have the break coming in here, you know, that then becomes the kind of vibe, you know? So we're kind of switching out the percussion vibe for the break vibe, you know? But the rest of the fundamental parts kind of remains the same, you know? Over here, when we get to the breakdown, we have similar a similar use of the building up sort of high end distortion break, and we have the pickup break again. This time it's coming in with a bit more high end in already. But we also have now this new low pass break under the whole breakdown here. And that's basically, that's just my main break, just bounced out as a sample, and then again low pass filtered, reverb slapped on it, and then delayed quite a lot as well. So it has a bit of this sort of slap back feeling to it. Yeah, so it's just a bit different to the intro because you got this new low pass version of the break throughout the whole thing, you know? But then the rest of it's kind of the same. And then you go back into the drop here, and I've got a little fill here.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
Yeah, this part changes up a bit. I'm not sure if I ended up changing this part in the final track in the end or not, because this version of the project is quite an old version now, you know. But I might have sort of done a similar thing with the break again in the second part. I'll have to re-listen and remember now. But yeah, otherwise the rest of it's kind of similar, you know. In the outro, just a little kind of low pass outro break, similar to what I've done here in the breakdown, you know. So yeah, that's the drums, and again, you're missing a few points where I've sort of grouped and bounced things together already, but that you can get the basic concept for the drums, you know. Quite clean processing, like not really much going on, just a bit of high end saturation, and yeah, kind of those just percussions, and the sort of distortion adds quite a lot of vibe as well if you take that off. Yeah, it helps to fill out the high end, you know, adds like maybe an extra 5% or something more kind of brightness and harmonics in the top end, you know. We'll move on from the drums then. So we're just going to talk about the basses here with their sort of layers, and these kind of little parts up here are sort of I think the sort of sounds made with the basses as well. And then we'll have a quick look at the stem mixing project as well. Alright then, so for the basses, everything is really centered around this one bass line, which is made in Serum. I believe it's actually one of the patches on one of my latest preset packs as well, although I couldn't remember which one it is. But basically, yeah, I used a Serum patch that I made. And I just kind of have that repeating, so it's quite an easy to follow bass line. It's not too crazy. All of the variation comes in the layering and stuff like that, you know. So I've got this room layer on everything, and this is basically, yeah, this is basically just following the main bass line again. Okay, and this one, I'd already probably at this point I've run it through a little convolution reverb already, and then I'm taking out the low end like multiple times. I'm doing a bit of a comb filter on as well. I'm doing a bit of space blending. to give even more space and stereo and more convolution. And I've got a stereo because I've used so many convolutions. I narrowed it down again, so I narrowed down my layer, and then I took out more low end again. Just kind of finding that sweet spot until it blends well with the original. Like it's not supposed to phase with the original. You're supposed to hear it adding extra harmonics and not sort of taking away from the power of the main one, you know? So that adds that whole dimension to it there, you know? Then we've got all of our extra little bass layers here. So we got this one down here, which is yes. I take little parts that I took a little part that I wanted to emphasize. So this part of the bass line here in the middle, on the sort of second bar here. Wow, this is the one that sort of pitches up. So it's the pitched up kind of note. So we have just an extra reverb convolution on that. I don't need to open up all the plugins, but comb filter, space blender, dual delay, multipass. You can hear it's just a convolution layer, and it just adds that how can you say? It kind of brings to life this particular note more, you know? It lets this note spring out more with extra layering. Okay, so it adds a nice bit of a dynamic twist to everything, you know? Right, then we've got a ruiner layer. And this is actually, it's kind of like the room layer we made before. It's on everything again, so it's another distortion layer that sits on everything. Yeah, and this one, again, as you see here, this is I haven't resampled it yet, so it's exactly the same as the main bass, and it goes through white blur 50 milliseconds, 100%, pure convolution. Then it goes through ruiner, messy distortion, distorts the low end a lot. Then it gets low end taken out of it. It gets a bit of transient shaping, and then it's probably just getting more low end taken out. Yeah, and a little bit of a low shelf and a little dip here, 344. Then it gets a bit of compression. It's a bit weaker, and now it just about lets the power of the main bass come through. There's a little bit of an overlap where it starts to starts to take a tiny bit of power away from the main one, but it adds this whole distortion tone on top of it all as well, you know? You keep pretty much all of the power of the main one still, you know? So it's kind of just about alright where I've EQ'd it there. So that's how it stacks up. You got the distortion layer, the room layer, this extra part of the this extra detail for that one note, and then you've got another one here, which is this is sort of an effect here. This is where basically I've run this one through a beam grain kind of effect plugin to create these fast little FX kind of chops, and they serve as like almost tails in the gaps between the bass, you know? So the bass line has gaps in naturally, and I use these little grainy FX tails in the gaps. So it makes like a nice sort of glitchy effect, you know? These little grain things, they've been processed. Obviously, they've already been bounced out with the effect on. But then I processed the sample as well. Similar kind of things. I love the comb filter from Kilohertz with the stereo mode. Sounds really great. Touch of reverb, you know, narrowing things in the stereo field in the end, taking out some low end. I like to narrow my layers because I tend to convolute a lot, so it gets wide quickly. So sometimes narrowing it down a bit helps to control everything, you know, control the stereo width. So then it all comes together like that, you know. And on the group processing, you've got a fair bit of processing here, but it's kind of just multi-band distortion in the high end. Mid-side EQing, taking out some of the sides in the low end. A bit of ring mod as well. This adds like a noise signal onto everything, so it's quite a noisy bass. Yeah, a little bit of noise on everything here with the bandpass noise. Now I'm using the multipass as a sidechain. So I'm sidechaining a little bit from, I think it's just mostly from it's from bus 2, wherever that is. I guess it's the drum bus, right? Yeah, so I guess I'm doing a little bit of sidechaining to, I'm sort of trying to target, I think, the little bit the kick and the snare. That's just the low end 97, and this is also the low end here. So I've probably just sidechained the kick, to be fair. I've probably done a bit more sidechaining in the stem project afterwards, but there's a little bit going on already. Logic doesn't like this much anymore, so we'll move on to the stem project in just a second. But yeah, it doesn't like it when I have these ones open for some reason while I'm recording. But yeah, you can see here it's just a small amount of compression, sidechain compression to the kick in the low end. You know, it's a subtle multi-band sidechain. Yeah, I think I might do a little bit more in the stem project. We'll see in a second. And then in the second kind of 16 over here, I basically just chop up the bass groove a bit. I have this new version of the first bass note, which is, it's been filtered, like low pass filtered. So the first bass note has a bit less high end on, and then it kind of gives a bit of a space for this sort of vocal thing that I brushed over earlier really quickly. So the vocal kind of has a bit more space in the high end in this part, you know. So it kind of sits on top of that bass note, and then other parts in the bass remain sort of fairly similar. You basically got the same players in there, but the groove has just slightly shifted around a bit, you know. I think I was able to achieve that new groove simply by chopping the audio around, you know, and just creating a new kind of remixed version of the bass line. So it wasn't too difficult to create that secondary groove, you know. But yeah, we've got some other things like textures made from the bass as well. So these kind of grains that we used as these little tails in the gaps here, they're used as almost like a riser in the build-up, as you hear here, you know. Just to kind of slowly tease in the texture of the bass. So they're quite subtle in the whole soundscape, but they do add to it, you know. And then again, up here, you've got a few other atmospheric sounds that are made using the bass, you know. So you've actually got one that's actually playing during the drop, and just like in my vocal group where I told you I had this background layer that tied everything together, you know, this layer down here, this depth layer that is always on. It's the same thing in my bass. I've got this textural depth layer which is always on, you know, it's all because it's got reverb and delay on it and it's always there. and because it's made from the bass texture, it helps a little bit to blend all the basses together. In fairness, the basses, they already are quite sustained for the whole time, and they've got room sounds and grainy bits in the gaps as well. But this layer essentially adds that extra bit of depth right at the back of the room for everything to sit on top of, you know? So it's very simple. It's basically just one of the bass hits kind of looped and run through, you know, probably Beam or at Portal or something like that. Convolution reverb. With a little, maybe little side chain on here as well, the LFO tool. Little kick side chain, just taking out the volume here. And yeah, more sort of low cuts and things just to take out. Yeah, so it doesn't have so much low end in for the bass to be, you know, weakened by it. Then you've got also up here, you've got a super convoluted version of the bass riff that also just creeps in to help tease in the bass as well here.
Low-flying aircraft.
Alright, and then you've got... It comes in again here, like for the kind of transition for this part here.
Which is exactly what he's been waiting for.
It's quite subtle there in the background, but yeah, it's just a convoluted version of the bass riff that just fills out, yeah, gives you some texture in the transitions, you know, the rises and stuff like that, you know, the build up, you know. But yeah, so those are just like extra little samples made from the bass that didn't end up in the bass group. I guess I didn't want to distort them and process them in the same way, you know. But that's basically, yeah, the rough version of the composition. Again, I might have done some other little tweaks and changes here and there, but that's kind of like the main project that you've seen, kind of all the elements involved and how I sort of composed it and layered it and arranged it and stuff like that, you know. So hopefully that's still quite helpful or inspiring, even if it's just a, you know, a cheeky little Neurofunk tune that I just composed with a little bit of a silly idea with the aircraft ambience, you know. But it's quite a fun one to make anyway. I like it as well, you know. So I'll just quickly brush over the stem project next, and then we're done for today. So here we have like the main stem version of the track now. And I actually, but this might sound crazy to you, but after this is done, I actually bounced it down into another stem project which only had 4 channels. But I like to do this sometimes to really just dial in the mix down, and it's kind of my workflow, you know. So then in this kind of stem channel we've got like the vocals. This is actually, it features all of the vocal kind of textures and the samples all together, you know.
Low-flying aircraft.
Come on.
So with all the layers on and everything like that, you know. Then I've got my yeah, I've got the drum highs. I did that separately. I did my drum kind of percussion parts and the little pickup notes separately. I've got my dark lead here. This is like the one that comes in just for the breakdown. We got the craft ambience, kind of main atmosphere to the track. The bongo effects. You see, these weren't in the composition I showed you before, I don't believe. I don't remember they being in there, actually. Let's take a listen in the mix. Yeah, so these guys are kind of new. I can't really remember exactly where they came from. So you see, my workflow is a bit crazy with my projects because you saw the main composition before, but there are a few like things that have changed since then in this stem version now. This is the atmosphere from the bass, so we heard that before, and then you've got yeah, these kind of blips we mentioned. Then you've got the main bass group, and look how many plugins I've got on here, mostly EQing. So this is all the bass together with all the kind of distortion layers, the convolution layers, all of that. Then I've got my main drum break. This is everything. All of the main parts, just minus the pickup things and the higher things here. And on the main drum break here, I've put the hot cold on it. I believe I only had the hot cold at this point in my production of the track. I believe in the earlier stage when I was doing the composition, I hadn't even got this plugin yet, so it came in, close to the end. But yeah, basically then the whole main drum break, it's got some mid-side EQing to take out a bit of stereo, give a bit more. It goes up quite high here, you see. Actually go up to like 360 hertz, so it's quite high up. So all of that down there is sort of going to be in mono, and that's because I leave a lot of space for the bass to have all the stereo, hog all the stereo down there, So the bass, I will have done some mid-side EQing, but it doesn't go up so high. It goes up to like 65 here, and then let's take a look at all the bass processing. So yeah, the reason I also set up a kick and snare sidechain here is because my drum break has all been bounced with the kick and snare in it already, So if I want to sidechain to the kick and snare separately, I've set up some muted kind of channels where I can sidechain from, So these are actually off. But yeah, I can use them to trigger the sidechain on the basses, So basically, the bass has sidechaining from the kick, like a low shelf sidechain here, taking out a bit of space of the bass for the kick to come through. All right. Then, as you saw before, we had our side cut. We got a little treble boost on the whole bass group, finding gaps in the spectrum. Then we've got a side chain from the vocal here. So the vocal actually, I don't know if you quite see. Yeah, you should be able to see it, but basically it might just be in certain parts of the track. But I definitely do sidechain the vocal, the bass to the vocal, so that the bass actually ducks down a bit when the vocal comes in, It's quite subtle. You might see it on another sidechain in a moment. A nice bass boost at 244. I felt like the whole bass kind of group needed it here. Really brought a lot more power out there, Another side cut, clearing out a bit more space in the low end. Another treble boost here around 2.4K. Then we got more sidechaining. Here's another sidechain to my kick. I'm just trying to get it perfect, so I'm dialing in a bit more here. Gives a bit more space for the kick again. Then I've got another one here. This is for the snare, this one. So obviously you see it's a bit higher up, like 320 hertz and a bit sharper. That's a snare sidechain. Help the snare cut through a bit, through the whole bass group. Then I'm distorting all the high end on the whole bass group even more. Makes a fair bit of difference there. More volume in the whole bass. Then I'm doing another sidechain. I think this is one where you might hear it a bit more from the vocal.
Come on. Let's go.
Or it says it's from the vocal track apparently. And if that's 11, so the vocal. The vocal is causing the bass to lose a bit of frequency around 500 hertz whenever the vocal kind of gets loud, So it helps the vocal to cut through everything a bit. All right. Then a little boost again, then another little side cut, and then finally another side cut. The side cuts are really sensitive, so if you have too much side information down there that you haven't got rid of, even if you can get a little bit more clarity down there, it helps the whole mix down quite often. So it's worth getting it perfect. So that's why I do it quite a lot, because it's every time you do it, you can kind of get a bit more space again if you kind of listen carefully. One EQ doesn't quite do the job a lot of times. All right, so we've got a bunch of other effects on some other channels where I'm basically just mixing everything together now, you know? So I'm deciding that the blips needed a bit of controlling with a compressor, bit of EQing, just taking out the low end, narrowing them very slightly, that kind of thing. The atmospheres, you'll get a nice big low cut again here. These kind of atmospheres on the drop. Bongos, leads, some channels didn't really need any work. The drum pickup kind of notes here, they get a bit of side chaining again from the bass actually. So they actually what I'm doing with the stem mixing is I'm finding new conflicts that exist between elements. That's the main job really. So I'm able to do a lot more side chaining between certain groups to get more clarity. That's the main goal really, you know. So yeah, got a bit more clarity in the mix when I sidechain my pickup kind of my drum break kind of group, and gave the bass a bit more space. They've got a bit of compression on as well, just to control the whole volume on all the breaks. Yeah, the drum high kind of high distortion layer, I did a bit more EQing on it, and I think I softened it a bit more. It's made it a bit more subtle in the mix, that whole kind of layer. And the vocals again, they just got a bit of compression to control their volumes, and they got a bunch of side EQing, low cuts, and then mid-side EQing a little bit more, taking out more kind of stereo the low end to give a bit more space for the bass, you know. So that then got me close to the final finished mix down. And again, I did bounce out the track. I won't need to show it now, but I basically just bounced out everything into 4 groups. So I had my drums, my bass, my vocals, and then the rest of it, you know, just 4 channels. And then I don't have that project to hand, but I basically would have done a similar thing where I might have done like a tiny extra little side chain if I needed a bit more multi-band side chaining for the kick to come through. I might have done a little bit of EQ, just subtle kind of things, a little bit more subtle even than this project here, you know. But that's then how I got the final mix down. And then once I had that, then I went to mastering. And then mastering is basically when I've got everything down to just one file, you know. I've just got imagine that's the final mix down pre-master, and then I'm just doing plugins on just one file, the whole thing, you know. And then at that point, I think I spent a few weeks mastering this one because it was driving me up the wall. So I had a few different versions, and eventually I settled upon the best balance. And I think the mix down sounds pretty good now. The master. I think the whole track sounds pretty nice. When you download it on Bandcamp especially, or listen to the original WAV, you know, you'll hear that the low end is really, really lovely in it, you know. It took quite a while to get there because it was just a bit of a task mixing everything around and then finding the perfect mastering settings for it, you know. But we got there in the end, and then that was it really. So that's how I finished it up. But yeah, it was a lot. It was actually quite a lot of work to mix down and master it. Probably took up most of the time dialing in all the settings, getting it right, you know. So it's something you don't want to neglect either. But anyway, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that. Sorry if I rambled a bit, and sorry if I didn't have like every little detail to hand and every little project. Again, my workflow can be a bit like this sometimes, where it's sort of bouncing between projects and then eventually somehow ending up with a finished track. But yeah, I hope that helps you out anyways, somehow, my G's. So thanks a lot for watching. Please like and comment, and leave a comment down below, and hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new. Check out the links in my videos as well for preset packs, mentorship, Patreon, and mastering as well. All right, that's it for me today. Much love, my G's. See you guys soon. Peace out.